Hi, I'm Kelly Wave, and this is a drawing I did of a landscape with a willow tree and some mountains behind it. I had this idea initially. I sketched this out like randomly. This was like one of my 3 a.m. adventures of not being able to sleep and then just uh, having some kind of thought in the brain, and all my thought was a willow tree, and then just built off of that. So I'll post that on Patreon later. And when I initially started this, I had no idea how to. I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it similar to the Desert Witch one or if I was going to do it like the Sunflower. And I ended up kind of doing a mix of both because you can see here initially I started with sketching it out and doing some line work. I end up just getting rid of this entirely. I do really like it. Like, I like the line work that I did for the tray, but it didn't feel like it fit the vibe that I was going for. Like, I wanted something more tranquil like, and it did end up kind of going a similar direction to the sunflower one that I did previously, where I just did not use line work at all. And that ended up being my base for the little lake, that little like lake or pond that's here as well. So that helped a lot with that. And then I started going in and doing the coloring, and it still felt off. Like, the line work just really felt off. So then I got rid of it here, and then I just start working on shading and getting more texture in. I really do like this tree at the end of it. Initially, it was too blurry, and then just slowly sharpened as it went. Because basically, the way that I thought about this is that if it was like a true landscape, and for if somebody were to be looking at it from afar, you wouldn't see a ton of detail. So I kind of just started out with very basic shapes, and then anything that felt too blurry, I just built up from there. Built up on top of it. And got the textures in and everything. And the one thing that was kind of awkward was that left side of the trunk. I just couldn't get that shadow fully right. I did eventually, but it was a little tough. And then the leaves were tough as well because they just looked awkward for the majority of the time, because initially I was going to go with a lighter pink color, but like a pinkish purplish color, because sometimes their flowers are like that. But it felt too jarring against the very green and like bluish background, so I ended up having to lighten it later. And I did a lot of trial and error for this because I did some studies before this. I did a tree study and I did the mountain study, but but for the tree, I didn't have any leaves on it. I didn't do anything that was like related to the willow or anything. So I was just experimenting this whole time, just trying to figure out what I needed to do. I knew what direction I wanted them. I wanted them to have like a slight breeze kind of feel, but I didn't want that part. I didn't want the bottom part of the trunk to be completely covered. I just knew I wanted the top half to be covered. And then I ended up doing I ended up concluding if I needed 2 layers to make this work, the leaves themselves, because then it layers nicely and it works. And well, yeah, it works. But it gives it more volume than what I initially had before. And then this is me trying to work on the grass, and I ended up having to stop and had to look up videos how to draw grass, because this was I kind of fell into my old habits of I need to draw every single detail, so every blade of grass. And it just doesn't work for this. Excuse me. One, it's too much detail for what I was going for, but also it's just a lot. It wasn't what I wanted, it wasn't even the colors I wanted. So then I ended up just looking up some videos, which were helpful in a way on a basic sense of making, like, as you see here, like what I started doing is I started in the back and then worked my way up because the horizon is going to be more blue. So then slowly have that work its way down, then make the little blotches of the, like, less saturated green, then taking the brighter green and putting it back so that it blends nicely. That, for the most part, is what I got from it, and getting, like, being selective in where the blades of grass are going to be. However, the one thing that was frustrating about looking up these is that they all kind of look the same, and they were all in Procreate. I think it's safe to say this is not a Procreate. Definitely not Procreate. For reference, this is Affinity Photo at the moment. It's just what I have. I don't feel like trying to learn a different program at the moment, so I'm just gonna go with this until, you know, otherwise I need something else. But it was frustrating because the way that they did it in Procreate, a lot of them do, is they're stamps. The blades of grass are stamps. And I didn't really, one, I didn't really want that, and two, I don't really have that, and I wasn't going to go out of my way to go make a stamp. And for what I was doing, I didn't really need it, clearly. But I ended up settling on this, and I really ended up liking this kind of setup, and it is basically what I wanted. It gives the depth and the detail that it needs, but it's not a ton, and that's what's important. It's not it's not overtaking the entire landscape, which is the part that if I had done my original detailing, it would have done. And then I messed with the colors of the stuff, and then went back and looked at the tree again, and you could see that shadow I'm changing a lot because I wasn't sure what I wanted for it. I just knew I needed something because that the roots on the left side, like, that's still gonna have light on it too, so I was trying to figure out that. It's still too blurry as I'm looking at it right now. It's gonna get fixed later. And then this is me messing with the colors more. I ended up adding more shading to the leaves as well, but not a ton. I just wanted a little bit more depth. And then I went in and started doing the deer. This deer was a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But it's because of the positioning of the deer. So like the back, like, kind of overlaps, and the body shape, because the way the deer are shaped, they're kind of rectangle, but they're not exactly a rectangle. So I was trying to mess with that and figuring out what position I wanted, and I didn't want the legs to be in an awkward position. And then the colors I messed with a little bit because I wasn't sure how detailed I wanted it either, because it didn't need to be super detailed. Like, if we're looking at a deer from far away, you're mainly only going to see the silhouette and maybe, if you're lucky, very minor shading. So that's what I ended up doing, and then having to later, because I actually made a note of it later because I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot, and I feel dumb now. Because the deer looks so awkward for so long, but it's partially because of the shape that I did initially, and because it didn't have shading, which I go in and mess with and play with. But it also wasn't anchored to the grass. There was no grass coming up and, like, going into view, because it's implied that it's a little bit longer of grass, but not, like, super long grass. So the deer just looked awkward for the longest time. And that does get fixed, and I really mess with this deer. Like, I go back and forth with it, I think, because it just looked wrong a lot, and then having to like back up and go back in, and then I added the grass in later. That was a little bit, and then I forgot the shadow too. I add that in as well, and then thought about adding a reflection. I added a little bit of a reflection, and then I was like, where do I want this deer to go? Ended up settling to in the exact same spot it was previously. It ended up being the best option for me. And here's me adding the shadow in that I forgot to do before. And that really solidified it. Like, once that shadow was in, it felt like it was in place. Like, it actually fit into the actual landscape. It wasn't just a random stamp just being like, I'm here. We don't know why we're here. We feel kind of awkward, but we're here. And then after that, I started going in and doing the mountains, which I do change this because initially I started out with the. I kind of did it similar to the way I did the study, where I had. I think it was every single study, I had the shadows mainly, except for like one. I had the shadows on the right. But for this one, it felt kind of off, so then I switched it. But that was also a challenge because I had to readjust in my head how the mountains would look mirrored. Because when I initially drew them, it looked kind of awkward when I mirrored it. That's why you saw me flip it and then revert back, because it was like, that doesn't look right. It's funny how it's like you can draw something that looks perfectly fine one way, but then you mirror it and it faces the other direction. It just looks awful. Like faces, that happens with sometimes. But for this, I ended up playing with trying to figure out the shadows in it. It kind of looked a little flat for a bit, but I did eventually figure it out because it was kind of. Mounds are not something I normally do. I don't think I've ever. If I've ever done mountains before, it was a very long time ago and I don't remember. But they're very large structures, and it's just mainly rock is the ones that I ended up going with. I ended up going with making it like a Rocky Mountain kind of thing, not really how mountains look on the East Coast. Like, there's a lot of grass, stuff like that, like how some mountains, like a lot of mountains are. But I end up going with like a really rocky design for this one. And this took a bit because I had to keep trying to line up the lasso and then just working with the shadows. In hindsight, I probably could have done different layers for ones that I knew were definitely going to be behind each other. I just didn't end up doing that. To think about now, it's like I should have done that. I didn't do it. That would have helped a lot, especially in these like parts where the shading's kind of off a little bit, and then I have to go in and fix it. But overall, I didn't end up liking them, and half of these get blocked by the tree anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And then when I add in the sky, it kind of fits more. I think it's because it was a white background initially. It just looked really awkward and flat, and then once the background gets in, it kind of looks more solidified. Yeah, like once the blue's in, it kind of fits a little bit more. And then I was seeing if any color would need to be adjusted, and then I went back in and added more. I made them darker is what I did, because against the sky they still looked really flat. So then I wanted to add a little bit more light and bounce to it, like more of the lights and darks of it, because they were so flat, and it felt weird just having them kind of be large structures with no sense of light source, it seems. Or at least that's how it like looked when I put all the like put the sky in and then looked back at it, because that really helps a lot, is like looking back and forth between like zooming in really close to get the shape right, but then backing out, making sure that nothing's overpowering each other in the design. Nothing looks awkward. Everything looks like it's in its place and should be in its place. So I thought about doing a foggy part of it. That's why I had like kind of the idea in the initial sketch, and then I don't really do it. I end up just getting rid of it, I think. Yeah, I just make the back of it a little bit more foggy, I think. Just to blur the line between the mountains and the grass, because that's how it would look like if you were staring and looking out at this. That's how it would kind of look anyway. And then I go in and adjust the leaves again because it still looked kind of awkward. And then I decided to add some petals in, so it looked like as the breeze is flowing, the petals on the trees are coming off and they're falling on the ground, and it looks really pretty. And yeah, that was it. Hope you like this. Subscribe if you want to see more. And I have a Patreon as well. You can go check that out. Thanks for watching. Bye!